afternoon. I'm glad to see so many have stayed behind and stayed with us. How was your fellowship meal? It was good, amen? I love seeing all the green, fresh food there. It's good stuff. Now, any public speaker will tell you that this is the most difficult meeting to have. Any guesses why? Right? Yeah. And it'll be my job to not only inform you, but hopefully keep you awake. And if you see anybody slipping into what we know as an alpha brain state, in other words, they're kind of doing this, just accidentally bump them awake. Amen? Amen? Amen. So this particular meeting, Tech Transformation Part 2, Brain Implications. So now we're going to talk, earlier we talked about the spiritual implications. Now we're going to talk about the actual brain implications. Technology has evolved constantly in just my short lifetime. And 50 years is very short. Amen? But it has progressed more in the last 5 years than in the last 50 years. 50 years ago, in fact, even just 25 years ago, everything we did was infused with human touch. Today, the world is automated. Today, the world is on demand. Today, the world is instantaneous, and it's increasingly human-free. We have websites and apps for dating. Who would ever thought that? We have websites for shopping. I am a fan of Amazon, I'm just saying. We have food to order kiosks from. In fact, we can order food from fast food restaurants and people will bring it to your door now. We have robotic assembly lines. We have self-driving cars. Just earlier this year, it was reported that Nissan plans to launch its own self-driving taxi service in Japan. And just last week, Elon Musk of Tesla announced their plans for self-driving taxis here in America. There are now companion robots. Are you aware of this? There are companion robots that are anatomically correct, and you can have your own intimate relations with them. No, I'm not kidding. And you can download different software programs that would include things like, I want to experience raping somebody. I want to experience someone being aggressive or docile. I want my companion to look like a 17-year-old boy or a girl. It's unbelievable what is currently happening in tech. In fact, Saudi Arabia just gave citizenship to a robot. Actual citizenship to a robot. So there's no question that tech is alive and well in our world. Now, tech is not of the devil, I believe. I believe a lot of the technology we can use to further the three angels' messages. Amen? Evangelism utilizes tech. We can use these amazing things of technology to further the gospel commission. So I'm not here against tech. I'm concerned about some of the tech. And so I wanted to find out, my wife and I, we started seeing some things changing even in our own children as we had a very careful home when we were raising them. They were not exposed to all these devices and all this stuff. My son, both of them, didn't even have their own private devices until they were, I think, 17. And some of you are going, wow, really? Yeah, praise God, really. I could have never done that, and you probably should have. But even still, when we were careful with that tech, it didn't mean that they were tech-free because they did have friends, they did have cousins, they did have aunt and uncles that had the tech, and so their eyeballs were bugging out their head anytime they were around it, you know. But eventually, as we saw that they could make better decisions, better informed decisions. We didn't keep it from them. We helped govern it and doled it out in small doses, if you will. Because we knew they were going to be leaving our home eventually, and we didn't want them to just be hit with it and dive in and lose their minds, right? So we had to teach them how to be able to govern it. But my children needed to learn how to socialize without these things. Right now, we have a lot of socially inept people, as we talked about earlier, that have not developed these interpersonal skill sets. And our emotional intelligence is at an all-time low as human beings. Most of us can't seem to disconnect anymore or power down. And when you're out in public, all you have to do is look around, and everybody's head is down. I was in the airport yesterday, and I was going through my notes, because like I said, this is a new subject for me, and I want to make sure I know what I wrote and where I'm going with all this. And so I was going through it, and I came across this little phrase of, just look at the people, their heads are down, right? And I looked up, and in the airport, it was like 90% of people were like this. They were not orienting with the surroundings around them. People have missed their flights because they're so absorbed in their tech. And they don't even have earbuds in. Today, listen to this. The average person checks their smartphone over 150 times a day. I don't. That means someone's checking theirs 300 times. No, that's how averages work. Yes or no? Yeah, I don't check my phone all the time. I used to. I used to think it was like beckoning me and I had to respond. No, I control it now. So, Kobe and I started asking the question, is living in this digital age changing us for the better or for the worse? And what type of social effects or physiological or neurological effects is social media and these devices having on us? And so, since the web gives us access to endless information, what impact does that have on our memory? You know what I used to say? Where's my brain? Where'd my brain go? Anybody ever said that? If someone would say, hey, I wonder about this, just a moment, and I would give them the answer because my all-knowing brain had all the answers. The reality was I was addicted to my tech and I hadn't realized it yet. So, does this have an impact on our memory? Does this have an impact on our attention spans? Does it have an impact on our actual neurobiology? And these are a few questions that we're going to dive into today, and we will answer them. So today we're going to be primarily focused on social media's impact, since these are the platforms that consume most of our time. So let's just define what we mean by social media. It is the social interaction among people in which they create, share, or exchange information and ideas in virtual communities and networks. So it's a virtual experience. There's sites like Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Pinterest, Instagram, Snapchat, LinkedIn, and there actually are more than 1,000 of them. So how much time do we as Americans spend, and I use the word spend, because not a lot of people are investing quality time, they're spending or wasting a lot of time, but how much time do we spend on these social sites as Americans? Well, last year, we spent 74 billion minutes on social media via our home computers, 40.8 billion minutes via apps, and 5.7 billion minutes via mobile web browsers, for a total of 121.1 billion minutes on just social networking sites. This isn't even just internet browsing and surfing. So, how much time is that? That is 2 billion hours every year just by U.S. citizens. That means 84 million days cumulatively. That actually means over 230,000 years of time lost just on social networking, just by U.S. citizens. Does that alarm you? Think about that. 230,000 years of time. Imagine if we took that amount of time and did something beneficial for our own country, for our own communities. Amen? Have you ever thought, people go, I just don't have time. No, duh! Right? I just don't have time for Bible study. Apparently, 230,000 years of time every year, and it's only going up. Do you think we're a distracted nation? No wonder the work's not getting done. Hello? Amen? No wonder people are not spending and being spent for the gospel's sake. Because they're spending 230,000 years a year just here in America on stuff that's not driving them toward the throne of Christ. According to a study referenced in an article, is the connected generation actually the alienated generation? It says that nearly 40% of Americans spend more time socializing via the internet than in real life. So the amount of people spending more time on the internet than face-to-face, like we talked about before, is now approaching 50% of our population. And the new research, the latest research has found that social media has the potential to make us less social. A surrogate for the real thing. For it to be truly effective communication and communion, all parties bear a responsibility to be genuine and accurate. Well, we know that's not the case all the time. And we do not allow it to be replaced, our human contact, with a virtual contact. And further, because most of our communication is now done via emails, texts, instant messaging, the potential, like we talked about earlier, for misinterpretation is growing. And I remember I got a text from a friend of mine, and I was wondering, why were they so upset? And I actually called him, and I said, brother, what's going on? Why are you so upset? He goes, oh, I wasn't upset. I was excited. Oh, okay. Why? I totally misread all of his capital letters and exclamation points, and I thought he was like yelling at me. Because I had no context, right? Remember, we learned that only 7% of communication is actually verbal. The other 93% was not present in his text. So when somebody writes in capital letters, does it mean that they're actually yelling, or are they just excited? Are one-word responses meaning that they're irritated and they don't want to talk to you right now? Are they busy, or are they just deficient at talking? On the flip side, does a smiley face mean an acknowledgement or an agreement that someone with me, or does it mean that they're just happy? We don't know, and we're drawing conclusions on frighteningly little information in the digital world. And as global citizens, my friends, we have to find a way to take advantage of all these amazing technologies and benefits of technologically based and enabled world, but we have to do it with wisdom so we don't lose the most important thing, and that is personal interaction with each other. Amen? Here's a funny little anecdote. A friend said, we had a power outage at my place on Sunday morning, and my desktop computer, my laptop, my DVD player, my television, my iPad, my new surround sound music system were all shut down. And then I discovered that my iPhone battery was empty. I couldn't even access my work email, and to top it all off, it was raining outside, so I couldn't even go and play golf. So I went into the kitchen to make tea, and I remembered the tea maker needs power. So I talked with my wife for about an hour. Wow, it seems like she's a really nice person. Amen? Come on now. There are spouses sitting in different rooms in the same house, not even engaging with each other. They're on social media, they're playing their games, they're doing all this stuff, and they're becoming experts at planting virtual gardens and not even a real garden. What's going on? We're being sucked in. And I do believe it's a scheme of a bigger plan that the devil has to distract us to the utmost, so we are not about our Father's business, and we are not even thinking of our own salvation. So each of us are actually looking for a sense of real community, as we talked about earlier. And unfortunately, a lot are merely satisfied with an online connection, connecting and neglecting that true community. So let's get into the brain implications with tech. We're going to look specifically at what happens and what can happen to the human brain with an overuse of technology. And they're learning it doesn't even have to be an overuse. I want to start with the very powerful National Geographic documentary hosted by Katie Couric. They have a program called America Inside Out, and she's an American journalist, in case you don't know. And they recently aired an episode about your brain on tech. And Katie shared how she has her own concerns while she was on the show. She shared her own concerns about her addiction to her smartphone. She's like, I'm thinking I might be addicted to my smartphone. And so she decided to put her brain to the test, and she met up with a young man named Steve Aoki. Now, Steve Aoki is an internet sensation, if you will. And he went to California State University, Dominguez Hill, with Katie Couric. And he's really actually like a tech guru. He's a DJ, and he's really into tech. In fact, he posts upwards of 150 times a day. And he's one of the top experts in some of this tech. And so they went to the University of California State, and they started talking to some of the world's top experts on tech addiction. And this social media celebrity and this television celebrity are some of the most connected people on the planet. Just Steve Aoki himself has over 23 million followers on social media. And he's obsessed with the human brain, and he even developed a foundation committed to studying it. Here's a conversation between the two. You can go and watch this online if you want to use some online time productively. Katie, she says to Steve, it's not an overstatement to say technology is your life. And Steve says, it's 100%. Not only on the production, the creation and performance side, because he is a music creator and DJ, he says, but also in connecting with my fans on social media. It's all technology. Do you worry that technology is doing what it's doing to your brain? He says, I'm always worried about my brain. This is the most precious thing I have. Amen. Amen. And this is how we should be thinking about our precious brains. It's the most precious thing that God has given us. It's the consciousness. It's who we are. It's how we perceive the world. It's how we love. It's how we embrace one another. It's how we worship God. It's the most important thing that we have. In fact, I was illustrating to my boys when they were younger that really the only reason we have a body, the reason I have legs and feet, is to move my brain around. That's really all they're for. My hands are just to pick things up so my brain can analyze them or put some things into my mouth. My mouth is there to feed my brain. My nose is there to give me senses for the brain. Literally, the brain is the center of everything. My heartbeat is there not for my arms as much as it is to keep my brain alive. Katie, she says, you know that old public service ad, this is your brain on drugs. She goes, we're going to find out what our brain looks like on tech. And so, at CSU, the researchers and professors of psychology, Mark Carrier, Larry Rosen, and chair and professor of communications Nancy Cheever, on people's addiction to technology, particularly smartphones and social media, their research is continuing to attract a lot of media attention. Cheever and Carrier performed experiments that tested Couric and Aoki's brains when distracted by their smartphones. Later, Couric sat down with Rosen to discuss the impact of this kind of increased technology. So the first experiment was to measure a physiological arousal. of how smartphones actually affect our anxiety levels. And as Katie and Steve watched a video, a computer tracked their heart rate and their perspiration. Unbeknownst to them, the scientists, the researchers, arranged for someone to occasionally text them. At every ding, the blue line on the monitoring screen spikes, indicating fluctuations in their anxiety, caused partly by the release of our stress hormone, cortisol. Steve said, I kept telling my brain to block it out. So they were hooked up to another test to read their prefrontal cortexes. Now, this is the frontal lobe of the brain, and this is responsible for the executive functions of the brain, okay? And so they measured across 16 different sections of the prefrontal cortex of how hard we have to work in order to focus. So they had to complete a series of tests uninterrupted, and then again, they did the same tests, but with the iPhone in the room. Now, notice this. This is Katie's brain when she was completing the tests without her iPhone in the room. And then they put the iPhone in the room, and as she was focusing and trying to do this, all that was happening was a notification. And her brain had to work 25% harder to concentrate with just the phone going off in her presence. She wasn't stopping to even look at it, just the fact that it was buzzing and notifying her that you have a text, someone's trying to get to touch you, to engage with you. Her anxiety levels were going up, and her ability to concentrate got 25% more difficult. Now, let's look at Steve's brain. Here's an image of Steve's brain activity, concentrating without his phone present. Now, this is incredible. Here is the brain activity of a self-described tech addict. His brain had to work 200% harder. This is his brain without his phone present. This is his brain going just with it there. Why? He's addicted to the tech. He could not concentrate. It was 200% harder for him to concentrate with just his phone present. Don't tell me tech doesn't impact our brain's ability. It doesn't affect me. Oh, yes, it does. I just don't think so. You're wrong. You're wrong. Science is proving with tangible evidence it does impact our ability to concentrate. It does impact our memory. It does impact the actual brain itself. Katie asked Dr. Carrier, what does this all tell you? Dr. Carrier, with this technology, you don't even feel that your brain had to work harder, though it can be shown in the data. Most psychologists accept that it is impossible to perform many tasks at the same time. Your brain has some fundamental limitations. Katie says, so multitasking is basically a myth? Multitasking is mostly a myth. It may take us more time to finish complicated tasks because of our devices. Even just present in our view, it can be distracting. When I read this, when I saw this program, I went back and started looking at some of their actual research. And as a result, I now do not sit at my desk when I'm working on projects or when I'm counseling with somebody or I'm writing something or doing an email, doing whatever. My phone is in the other room now. I don't even just turn it off and set it there because my brain just kind of goes, my phone goes, hey, look at me. Think of all the things that you're missing out on. The whole world is here. No, I literally don't even have it in the view of my eye. And guess what? My productivity, way up. Concentration, way up. He continues on. Let me back up one more real quick. Even having it present in your view, it can be distracting. That's because, he continues, of the thoughts you have about the phone. You actually have to inhibit those thoughts in order to be productive. So Katie and Steve both shown signs of actually being addicted to their screens, to their phones. And it was recommended by the experts to implement a minimum of 2 hours a day of tech-free time. Now, some of you need to implement, not some of you, all of us need to implement tech-free time every day of the week. Why? Because, friends, we're not robots. We are human beings that need human interaction, that need to live in a world that is tangible, not so digital. Take time off every day. Scientists, doctors, psychologists recommend at least 2 hours a day. And it doesn't count when you're taking a nap. It literally means when you are awake and you'll have to find something else to do. Turn it off. You're not that important. Amen? Amen? Turn it off, Christian. You're not that important. Anybody heard of a man named Simon Cowell? He's very popular in the entertainment world. And he's the guy that was largely responsible for founding America's Got Talent and starting big shows, okay? And finding talent. He's kind of a music guru, if you will. This man is one of the most connected men on the planet. This man makes hundreds of millions of dollars, and he is sought after by everybody. And you know what he decided over 14 or 15 months ago? I'm done, and I'm sick and tired of my smartphone. And so for the last 14 months, he's been living without his smartphone. Now, Simon Cowell is a lot more important to get a hold of than you and me. And if he can do it 24/7, we can do it for a couple of hours. Amen. The problem is we crave stimulation. Many internet users feel a craving for the stimulation received from these gadgets. And the culprit is dopamine, which is delivered as a response to this stimulation. Dopamine is a neurotransmitter that helps control the brain's reward and pleasure centers. It also helps regulate emotional responses. And it enables us to not only see rewards, but to take action to move toward the rewards. Unfortunately, without this beautiful, wonderful neurotransmitter, we can experience a bunch of different symptoms. One of them, fatigue, lack of motivation, inability to experience pleasure, insomnia, hard time get going in the morning, mood swings, forgetfulness, memory loss. Some of you are going, uh-oh. Friends, here's what's happening. These types of symptoms are happening at young ages now. Why? Because these devices and these apps, they juice the brain. They cause abnormal amounts of release of dopamine and adrenal, and it exhausts our adrenals. And so before you know it, you are fatigued. You're having a physiological response because of chemicals being released in your body by this artificial stimulation. Is that making any sense? So when you juice it over and over and over again, our little kids, I was never fatigued as a kid. When I woke up, let's go. Little nap. Right? No, man. You look at little kids now, they're just like, what's going on? They're being juiced. Why? We were not made for this. And so we start them when they're little infants now. I see infants on airplanes with their eyeballs bugging out their heads on the devices. I'm going, can I talk to you? I have a little information you might be interested in. Do you love your child? Yes. Can I tell you something? Inability to focus and concentrate. Now, there are other things that will cause these symptoms, but nonetheless, tech addiction causes these problems. Inability to connect with others. We've talked about that. Low libido. sugar cravings, caffeine cravings, inability to handle stress, inability to lose weight. These are just some of the symptoms that are associated with tech addiction. Did you know that this might be doing that? I didn't know that. Our ability to focus is being undermined by bursts of information. You have this email that just pours in, phone calls, other incoming information, tokes, texts, and notifications. They actually start to change how we think and how we actually behave. A New York Times article references several studies on our lack of concentration, and this is the summation of those studies. The stimulation provokes excitement, a dopamine squirt, if you will, that researchers say can be addictive. In its absence, people feel bored. That's like the biggest word now. Just bored. That's just so boring. It's like the cardinal sin now to be bored. Adam Gazzaley, a neuroscientist at the University of California, San Francisco, said, "The nonstop interactivity is one of the most significant shifts ever in the human environment. We are exposing our brains to an environment and asking them to do things we weren't necessarily designed to do. And we know already there are consequences. New research shows that computer users at work change their windows or check emails and other programs nearly 37 times an hour. How are we getting anything done? If I was a business owner today, I would be very careful with my employees because time is money, and I would be making sure, in fact, even in our ministry, I implemented a change. We've only got a couple people that work for the ministry now. We had 7 or 8 at one point, and now we're just down to a few of us. But the reality is this. I even told my in-laws who work for us, I even told my wife, I even told myself, after reading this information, check your email 3 times a day, that's it. Do you realize we used to check mail once a day? When it came to our mailbox. How did they survive all those years? Very well. Even better than we are today. And then we got this electronic mail, this whole new fandangled thing, right? And that wasn't even quick enough. Now we've started texting, and if you don't text me back within 32 seconds, I'm going to wonder what's wrong. I texted him like a minute ago. He hasn't even responded. We sit there and wait for the little dot. Okay, they're texting now. Oh, what are they going to say? What are they going to say? Dopamine, it's all part of it. And I'll explain this later. So the challenge is, these workers, productivity has gone through the floor because they're switching to different things on the computer, the internet, Amazon, checking email, 37 times an hour. How would you get anything done? And that's the average. Many people think that multitasking makes them far more productive. Research shows absolutely otherwise. Heavy multitaskers actually have more trouble focusing and shutting out irrelevant information, and they experience actually more stress. It causes deeper releases of cortisol. And scientists are discovering that even after the multitasking ends, listen, fractured thinking and lack of focus persists. In other words, this is your brain on tech, and this is now your brain off tech. That's scary. Nora Volkow, director of the National Institute of Drug Abuse and one of the world's leading brain scientists, along with other researchers, found the technology is rewiring our brains. It is actually rewiring our brains. She says, and other researchers compare the lure of digital stimulation less to that of drugs and alcohol to that of food and sex, which she says are essential but counterproductive in excess. In a recent study from researchers at the University of British Columbia, they found that when people were limited to checking their emails just 3 times a day, their stress levels decreased significantly. That's why I said 3 times a day. I read that study. I said, guys, new law at Shepherd's Call Ministry. You can only check your email 3 times a day. The knee-jerk reaction was, that's not practical. People have to hear from us. I said, they don't have to hear from us in 32 seconds. They don't. Can they wait a few hours? They're going to have to, because the new law, thou shalt not check your email more than 3 times a day. In fact, you know what's interesting? At Shepherd's Call, we're going to go through and rewrite our bylaws. And we're going to rewrite them as thou shalt not. By the way, that's not my own idea. Dr. Nedley said that that's what they had done at Weimar, and I said, that's a great idea. So that's not my original idea. So we're going to rewrite our bylaws as thou shalt not. Things like, thou shalt not operate in the red. Amen? That's awesome. And that means the ministries need to pay off some debt. So we're going to work on that. Amen. The folks who limited their email checking also felt that they were more able to complete their most important work, and they felt a greater sense of accomplishment at work. And I remember seeing a video of a man that was the company where they implemented this. And one of the bosses did not like this. He was like, no, if I send you an email, you better respond because I need an answer right now. And the other partners were saying, wait a second, we need to really rein this all in. And he went to one of his guys underneath him in middle management, and he went across the building, and he went to this man and said, I sent you an email 15 minutes ago. He didn't even call him. He goes, I want to be face to face. I sent you an email 15 minutes ago. Why have you not responded? He said, because this morning in our meeting, you told me that this task was my most important task. And I respect you and this job, and I didn't want anything to distract me. And he went, carry on. Amen. That's where we need to be. Are you going to allow anything to distract you in your morning devotions? Come on, you know you already do. When you wake up, is the first conversation with your Lord? Or is it like this? You wake up and you go, Come on. This is the habit of most. Friends, this is not life. It should only be a facet of life. It's not life. Life comes from our Savior. So, this is interesting. Think about this. If you have an important task, if you have something that you need to focus in on, something that you need to get done, and it requires a high level of cognition, when you sit down to, let's say you're going to write something, okay, whatever it may be. Maybe it's a very important email, maybe it's a message, maybe it's a report, whatever it may be. You're going to sit down and you need a high level of cognition. There's what's called a setup cost, okay? When we sit down, all of us, when we're going to do some high-level thinking, there's a process that we will go through. Whether you're aware of it or not, it happens. You have to get focused. You got to figure. So I write different things out. I'll outline little things on a piece of paper. It's this setup cost. I don't know why I still like a pencil and paper. It kind of just helps my analog brain. But I kind of write these things out. There's a setup cost. Eventually you get into it. You're setting aside the distractions. And then, bam, it takes about 15 minutes. Some people might be a little quicker. Some people might be a little bit longer. But about 15 minutes, researchers find, to actually get into that, and now you start writing. So you've invested on the setup cost. You're now get going. You're really getting rolling. And then all of a sudden, or bing, or zzz. And you're like, okay, yeah, all the different little things that we have, right? And all of a sudden, you're a little bit tempted to be distracted, but no, man, you're rolling. And all of a sudden, you're like, oh, I wonder if that was Bob. I did text him earlier, and I sent him that email. Yes. Okay, just a second. Let me grab that. So now we are distracted by this, but this is the most important right now. And then we go, oh, it wasn't Bob, and it was something else, and we chase this for a minute, and then we set it down, and then guess what we have to do? We have the cost of the setup again. And so every time we're distracted, we have to pay the setup cost. So imagine that as a worker and you're paying them hourly or salary. How productive are they actually being when this thing's going, Do you know that many companies now have put into place, because of research like this, check your cell phones. You can have them at lunch. You can have them at your break. They won't even allow them at the desk anymore. I think it's really a good idea. Yeah. In fact, at family dinner at my mom's house, everybody's cell phone has to go into a basket. And the first person that picks it up is buying dinner next time. Oh, yeah. Whether that means you're bringing pizzas to bake in the oven or what. And so you know what's pretty amazing? Nobody wants to buy but grandma. So, and sometimes they forget and she's like, yes, you're buying. Oh, no, come on, no. And she sticks to it, and she makes us. Why? We're getting together to spend time together. I remember at Thanksgiving, my niece was there. She was 20 at the time. She had brought a friend who didn't have a place to go for Thanksgiving. Said, Grandma, can I bring my friend over? Well, she said, well, of course. We have an open door policy at our home when it comes to the holidays. And so we were already out serving at Salvation Army for dinner, and then we came home and had our own Thanksgiving. And as we were there, actually just for dessert, we actually ate at Salvation Army as well. But we come home for dessert, and she came home. They were sitting at the same table, texting each other. And my mother was sitting across from them, and I was sitting next to her, and I bumped my mom, and I went, and she went, and she saw what was going on. You could hear, zzz, zzz, zzz. My mother goes, excuse me, Ashley, are you texting, I don't remember what her name, right now? And she's like, yeah. She's like, all right, that's it. And so she went and grabbed the basket, and that was the first time that she implemented the basket rule because of my niece, Ashley. Thanks a lot, Ashley. No, thanks a lot, Ashley. Because now, when we do get together, it's not even a thing. You know what's amazing? Even Ashley looks forward to the time when we actually are at Grandma's house because we play games, we're enjoying each other, and I bring my camera, and I am the official photographer. You don't have to have your phones out doing it because you just might get distracted and get in it. So I just take all the photos, and they're beautiful photos, and I send them to everybody. So we even took that excuse away. These are things that you can do to make changes in your life, and they're little things, and this is controlling tech, not tech controlling you. So, be careful, because Bob has not returned that email, and I got to get back to this project. But you know what? I can't concentrate because now I'm too focused, so let me just text Bob real quick. And then you go, okay, and you wait there. Bob's not responding to my text. Why? Because we live in an instant gratification society now. And we even wait to see his little 3-dot reply. Okay, he's texting something, and we're waiting to see it. And if he doesn't, we're like, what's the deal? Dude, I emailed you, I texted you early. Maybe Bob is doing something more important than saying, where do you want to meet for lunch? Amen? So what is all this? This is tech controlling us. And now you got to get back to that task. There's the setup time again. So just to start writing, you've already wasted anywhere from 30 to 45 minutes, and you haven't even got the first line written. Be aware of these things. There's abundance of research. We don't have to continue going into all of it that shows that when our tech is with us, we do not concentrate as well. It does not help us to stay focused, and we are constantly interrupted and tempted to be interrupted because, frankly, a lot of people suffer from procrastination. And instead of getting that thing done, I had to answer that text. We'll be distracted by all this other stuff instead of just doing the job. In an article entitled Too Much, Internet Use Can Damage Teenagers' Brain. The overuse of the internet by teenagers is causing atrophy of gray matter. That means actual shrinkage, leading to concentration and memory problems. Excessive internet use may cause parts of teenagers' brains to waste away, the study reveals. Internet use can damage teenagers' brains. Now, it's even more damaging to the developing brain, but it can still damage adult brains as well. And by the way, young men's brains are not fully developed until they're in their early 20s. And about 20 for young ladies. The article continues, atrophy of gray matter in the brains of heavy internet users grew worse over time. This could affect their concentration and memory, as well as their ability to make decisions and set goals. It could also reduce their inhibitions and lead to inappropriate behavior. In fact, what they found is that the tech, for some reason, directly assaults certain parts of the brain, including the frontal lobe, where your character is contained. So not only does it cause shrinkage of the brain and problems with concentration, memory, decision-making, goal setting, but it reduces our inhibitions? Wait a second. As a Christian, shouldn't we have God's control of our mind to help us with our inhibitions? To not have inhibitions, but rather to exhibit control? Yes or no? Absolutely. So there are noted physiological, neurological, and spiritual implications here with this tech. Researchers from China, they created a very interesting study where they took MRI brain scans of late teens to young adult students, male and female, who spent about 8 to 13 hours daily on the internet. You might think, that's crazy. That is a worldwide number. That's not just a Chinese number. In fact, the numbers in the U.S. tend to be a little bit higher. And these were students that were already clinically diagnosed with what's known as internet addiction disorder. And this, by the way, was a diagnosis as early as 8 to 10 years ago in China. We're just now starting to say that this is a thing here in America. We're about a decade behind. So understand, we're not talking about work or school-related use of these devices, but 8 to 13 hours of free internet use, including social media, online gaming, YouTube, Facebook, that type of thing. As a result of the studies, the youth were actually diagnosed with IAD. So let's look at it for a minute. The control group, late teens to young adult students, male and female, played less than 2 hours per day. There were equal number of students in both groups, and here's what they found. Multiple studies from 2011 to 2013 showed atrophy, actual shrinkage, and loss of tissue volume in their gray area, the gray matter area, where processing occurs in internet and gaming addicted individuals. So they have proven conclusively there is a neurological change to the brain utilizing that amount of internet activity, whether it's online shopping, gaming, whatever it may be. So it's not, I don't game. Are you on the internet? Are you just surfing for hours endlessly? It's impacting your brain. One set of MRIs images focused on the gray matter of the brain, the wrinkled surface or the cortex, where the processing of memory, emotion, speech, sight, and hearing, and motor control occurred. Comparing gray matter between the two groups revealed atrophy within several regions of all the students' brain involved in the study. It was worse in the ones that were fully addicted, but there was still atrophy and problems with those who were limited to 2 hours a day. Uh-oh. Because the average person sitting here is probably on their tech at least 2 hours a day. This is scary to me. This means that both groups had shrinkage. Both groups had the atrophy. Both groups showed the challenges in their processing gray matter. Our brains were not designed for this kind of constant artificial stimulation. Areas affected included the frontal lobe, which governs executive functions such as planning. This is all direct quotes from their studies. Areas affected included the frontal lobe, which governs executive functions such as planning, prioritizing, organizing, and impulse control. And of course, like I said before, The frontal lobe is where your character is contained. This is where we obey. This is where we have a conscience. This is where we make our moral decisions. And it's to be the king of the brain. Has anybody here not seen our Distraction Dilemma series? If you haven't seen our music seminar, raise your hand real quick. Okay, there's several of you. So quickly, the frontal lobe of the brain is to be the king of the brain. And you never want the king in any given country that the king is supposed to govern, you never want the king to be deposed or taken down, right? Right. You never want the king to be drunk because he can't rule. You never want the king to be a crazy man because he can't rule. You always want the king to be on the throne governing the different provinces of the land. Yes or no? In a good kingdom that's going to be managed well, of course. Well, your brain is a kingdom. And there's different provinces of the brain. And the king, the frontal lobe, is to be in charge of and regulate and govern the other provinces. If the king is inhibited in any way, if the king that's responsible for all the executive functions and the moral direction of the kingdom, if the king is deposed, or the king is being shrunken, or the king is being hypnotized or drugged, or whatever it may be, he cannot effectively govern his domain. It's the same with the brain. If the frontal lobe is impacted in a negative way, and it is not connecting well to the other provinces of the brain, then in certain situations, that other part of the brain can gain the ascendancy without the governing effect of the frontal lobe. Does that make sense? So friends, we need to be careful because the other parts of the brain, if they take over without the governing effect of the frontal lobe, when we're provoked, we say, I'm going to turn the other cheek, I'm not going to get in a fight here. Because my governing agent, the king, was alive, my frontal lobe was functioning properly, but if it's not functioning properly and I'm provoked, I'll get into a fight or flight instinct, a more base passion, not a more executive decision, a more base reaction, because that's what drives from different parts of the temporal lobe and the other provinces of the brain, and I might turn around and just punch somebody and get in a fight without even thinking about it, because higher cognition happens here. But if there's something wrong with here, we're going to act more base, more animalistic, more human without the divine influence. Making sense? Everybody? Doctors, everybody included. Yeah, making sense? Are we awake? All right, good. So, technology, if we're not careful, can starve the king. It can shrink the king. It can rewire the tender gray matter where we discern that still small voice of God. Continuing on, volume loss was also seen in the striatum, which is involved in the reward pathways in the suppression of socially unacceptable impulses. Think about this. What's one of the big things that happens on social media between teens today in a negative context? Social bullying, cyberbullying, right? Did you know this is a major problem? So think this through for a second. The very devices, the media itself has implications, not just the content, which is causing these young people to not have proper impulse control because it is shrinking parts of the brain, including the frontal lobe. So when somebody pounces on somebody else, it seems like a good idea to do the same thing, and we experience what's called group intoxication, and we all get involved in this cyberbullying. Why? It's impacting our ability to say, no, I'm not going to do that. Lots of young people are reporting they feel just numb. And the phrase now is, I'm just dead inside. I'm just dead inside. It's kind of become almost a little hip to say that, and I'm sad that that's the case. But friends, I think it's actually a real thing. Because what's happening is, it's messing with our ability and our children's ability to actually experience joy and pleasure now. It's messing with the brain, so much so that many of our young people are numb. You might as well just take some of the mind-numbing drugs, because for some, it has become a drug. This is serious, my friends. Be careful, be careful, be careful. Our brains, many times, are literally not able to suppress unacceptable impulses because our brains are being actually hijacked, rewired, or shrunk, or all of it. Psychologists now, listen to this, sociologists are actually terrified that our new digital natives in the very near future may not have the capacity for impulse control or moral decision making. Imagine a generation of youth that have had their minds altered like that. I used to think, how in the world would a death decree? We know, if you're studied up, you'll know that eventually there will be a death decree that is put out there to actually go after the remnant church of God. Are you guys aware of this, by the way? It's not some conspiracy theory. This is legit biblical evidence. We know this is going to happen. I used to think to myself, how is the devil going to trick a generation of young people to actually go and take out grandma or grandpa or the neighbor or whatever if they happen to be law-abiding citizens and they obey the Sabbath of God? I was thinking, this is like a fantasy. I'm serious. But friends, all I have to do now is look around and see what is going on where the frontal moral lobe is being seared and they are not able to control their impulse. They're not able to actually make moral decisions. And when sociologists who are secular, not even spiritual, and you have psychologists and psychiatrists, and they're all saying, the next generation, we're concerned they're not even going to have a moral compass anymore. Guess what that means? You become more like the devil than you are like God. So when they're given permission to go do these heinous things, they don't judge it's inappropriate. It's what you do. Think about this. They're already playing and addicted to first-person shooter games, and they're learning militaristic strategies for taking out their opponents. Next step, just put the gun in their hand. They already know how to communicate. They're already using headsets. This is not a stretch. They're training up a generation, and the devil is the general. Is that too much of a truth today? This is serious. Oh, they're just playing a game. They're just using tech like we used to talk on the phone and gossip. Sounds like to me, the enemy of souls is all too happy to have us addicted to our devices. Because the battle is for the mind. The battle is for the mind. Why? This is where we obey. This is where I consent. This is where I say, not my will, but your will. And if that's not functioning, guess what? I become a drone. And the devil goes, as long as you're my drone. A finding of particular concern, by the way, was damage to an area of the brain known as the insula, which is involved in our capacity, listen, to develop empathy and compassion for others, and our ability to integrate physical signals with emotions. So, is it important for a Christian, a parent, a pastor, a business owner to have empathy and compassion? Yeah. In fact, the only way I've learned that you actually win a soul to Christ is because you have developed this gift called empathy and compassion. It's not the numbers and the beast. That might be intriguing, but it never converts a soul. It's connecting them with Christ, who had so much empathy and so much compassion for his lost people that he became one of the lost people, if you will, and died for the lost people. No greater illustration of empathy and compassion. Christ had and has a fully functioning frontal lobe. And he wants the remnant to have the same. And so, this study's finding that the insula is having problems. There's no more empathy and compassion like it used to be. So imagine that. A frontal lobe seared. They're not able to govern themselves and say, this is not right. They can't make that moral decision. And there's no capacity or limited capacity for empathy and compassion. Yeah, that's a generation of the devil's going, I almost got it. I almost got it. They're almost there. And you know what? They're even paying for the service. They're paying me $100 a month. Why? They need unlimited data now. And I'll just charge them more. They'll actually pay for it. And they'll think I'm doing them a favor. Aside from the obvious link to violent behavior, these skills dictate the depth and quality of personal relationships, which of course is in trouble. Increased violent behavior was consistent across all of these tech-addicted people. We're still in the same study right now that was done in China. These are all their findings. Increased violent behavior, quote, was consistent across all tech-addicted people, and the depth and quality of interpersonal relationships was dramatically decreased. The scans showed the longer their internet addiction continued, the more serious was the damage. That's a direct quote. The more serious was the damage. And on top of all of that, research has also demonstrated a loss of integrity to the brain's what's called white matter. You've all heard of gray matter, but a lot of you haven't heard about white matter. It was damaged and spotty. Here's a direct quote again. Spotty white matter translates into a loss of communication within the brain, including connections from various lobes of the same hemisphere, as well as links between the right and left hemispheres, and paths between higher cognitive and lower emotional and survival brain centers. This is exactly what I was just talking about, where the frontal lobe is now becoming disconnected with the other parts of the brain. And when you do that, you become a base, lower, passion-driven person.
But it's so fun.
I know. That's what the devil does. Impaired cognitive function. A third part of the study showed impaired cognitive production. And this was a study published in the PLOS, the PLOS One journal, was carried out by neuroscientists and radiologists, excuse me just a moment, at universities and hospitals in China. This was a different study, where 24 million youth are estimated to be addicted to the internet and their devices. Imaging studies have found less efficient information processing and reduced impulse inhibition, increased sensitivity to rewards, and insensitivity to loss, and abnormal spontaneous brain activity associated with poor task performance. Taken together, now we're back to that original study. Taken together, these studies show internet addiction is associated with structural and functional changes in the brain regions involving emotional processing, executive attention, decision-making, and cognitive control. This is the research author's summary of the neuroimaging findings in internet and gaming addiction. Now, what is internet addiction disorder? Well, first of all, it's known as different things, and you might have heard it as internet use disorder, problematic internet use, compulsive internet use, internet gaming disorder, technology addiction, or the latest one, eye disorder. They're all the same thing. It's addicted behavior and tendencies and problems with tech. It is basically all internet addiction disorder, which is excessive computer use, whether it's devices or a desktop, that interferes with daily life. It encompasses such activities as online gaming, excessive online gaming, excessive online shopping. So you may think, well, I don't play games, but yeah, you shop. Excessive shopping, compulsive online gambling. But you know, I think it's one of the most, I have nothing to codify this yet, but it's one of a ramped up problem that we're finding even in our church, online gambling. Oh, we won't go to the casino because we shouldn't gamble, but we'll do it in the privacy of our own home. Young people, I have had elders come to me and say, I'm in trouble. I'm in trouble. my savings account is gone. I can't pay my mortgage this month. I'm serious. I didn't even understand all the phone calls we were starting to get. And part of this, I was like, wait a minute, you're gambling? First of all, I was like, you're gambling? I thought that was just a no. Right? I mean, I'm just that simple Christian that goes, I'm not going to waste that. I mean, long time coming, easy going. And I couldn't believe that we were having problems with this. So as all these different phone calls come for counseling, and I'm sitting here, I better study that one out, and I better study. But then all this stuff starts to develop because we're having issues, right? So excessive blogging. If you're an excessive blogger, excessive social networker, compulsive watching of internet videos, it doesn't have to be just good videos. It can also be things like pornography. So, and it doesn't have to just be pornography. It can be seemingly innocent things, but it becomes the habit, and you're not even fulfilled and happy unless you get your fix. In the current psychiatric report, a publication from November 2012, it states, problematic computer use is a growing social issue which is being debated worldwide. Internet addiction disorder ruins lives by causing neurological complications, sociological disturbance, and social problems. And then surveys in the U.S., Europe, and Asia have indicated alarming prevalence rates. Both China, listen to this, South Korea identified internet addiction as a significant public health threat back in 2008. But here in the U.S., we don't even want to look at it. Some won't even acknowledge today that it's a real thing or that it exists. And far too many parents, I know personally, have stuck their head in the sand. Too many tech companies, this means loss of profits. And too many leaders are ignoring, even in our own denominational work, are ignoring the serious problems that have developed. Give me a break, Christian. I'm not addicted, and neither are my kids. I praise God, I hope not. Dr. Victoria Dunkley, a child adolescent psychiatrist and writer for Psychology Today, poses a question in her article, Too Much Screen Time Damages the Brain. Here's what she writes. Good question, bud. But what about kids who aren't addicted per se? So we just looked at those who were addicted, right? But what about those who aren't addicted? Because maybe, I know some kids, they aren't addicted. Addiction aside, a much broader concern that begs awareness is the risk that screen time is creating subtle damage even in children with regular exposure, considering that the average child clocks in more than 7 hours a day. Did you realize that? In fact, did you know you can put on your phone, it's already on your phone, you have an iPhone, I'm not sure about Android, I'm sure it's there, they always try to keep up with each other, but it will tell you right on your phone exactly how much time you're spending on what kind of sites, even specific to the site. I promise you, you'll be shocked. You are on it way more than you realize. How do I know that? That was my wife, that was me, that was my mother, and my mother-in-law. We were all shocked because we put it to the test. I'm the guy that wants, I'm like a lab rat. I'm like, let's experiment on ourselves, you know. And I was shocked how much time I was spending, even though it was little pockets of time. Man, it amounted to a ridiculous amount. I was logging more than 6 hours a day on things that were not work-related. Now, understand, I wasn't not working, but it wasn't helping me be efficient on my work. And I thought I was maybe putting an hour in a day. I don't know about you, but there's something, I don't know if I should use the word magical, when all of a sudden you start, and then you kind of go, vroom, and you come back to reality, and you literally go, whoa, where'd the time go? That was like 2 hours. Oh, I didn't even get dinner going. Right? Oh, I'm not having that problem. Praise the Lord, I was. So even these kids that are getting regular exposure, she says, as a practitioner, I observe that many of the children I see suffer from sensory overload, lack of restorative sleep, and a hyper-aroused nervous system, regardless of diagnosis, what I call electronic screen syndrome. These children are impulsive, moody, can't pay attention, much like the description of those diagnosed. And as if all of this wasn't enough, psychologists and scientists have also discovered that digital technology is changing the way we think. Psychologist Jane Healy believes children should be kept away from computer games until they are 7 years old. They shouldn't even have the tech. They shouldn't even be, even if it's innocent stuff, because it is abjectly opposite. Maybe that's not the right word. It's totally opposite of, instead of doing this, and what they are doing is this, as opposed to grabbing that block and stacking it there and doing. They're not getting the 3D work as a child, which helps develop the brain. In fact, kids don't even want to go out and hike anymore. They don't want to fish. They don't want to go build forts. They don't want to do all this stuff. And that's the best thing for the brain. Instead, they're living everything right here. There are serious consequences. And the professionals are saying, no, no, no. Don't even let your kids have it until at least 7 years old. But here's the problem. I'm going to be really honest with you. I may never come back here, so I got to like just lay it all out there for you. Today's modern parent is a very lazy parent, even in the remnant church of God. They don't want to hear their kids going, but everybody else has an iPad, why can't I have one? Kids walking around with Bluetooth devices talking on their phone, and they're like 8 years old. Mom and Dad, step up and do your job. Frankly, your children someday, maybe not right now, they will thank you for it. My son, who went out into the world and started exploring everything, including that LSD that broke his brain, he is now living with us, and you know what he said? You don't understand, Dad. Of course I do. You don't understand how thankful I am for how you raised me. And you know what? It wasn't fun sometimes. My kids didn't have the devices until they were in their later teens. That was called radical. No. It's because I'm educated. And it's because I want the best for my kids. And I love them enough to even hear them whine and complain. But I also have to be a father. And Kobe had to be a mother and say, not just because I said so, but no, here's the reasons why. I'm not just making an arbitrary, unilateral move here to say, no, it's all evil. No, it's not what I was saying. Did we have some television in our life? We did. But did we watch programming that was beneficial? Sure. There is good programming out there. So we weren't the people, for a long time we had nothing because I had a problem, not them. But if you're going to parent our children and raise them, by the way, our children are on loan to us from God to raise them for Him. That's a direct quote. They're not there for us to just experiment with or to jack up or to say, we'll get as close to the world as we can because I don't want to make, the worst thing apparently for a parent these days is to upset your child. Whoever said your child was going to not be upset? They might be upset because they have to take out the garbage. So what? When you were a kid, you didn't want to take it out either. But guess what? You were raised without all this stuff, and you turned out okay, I think. I don't know, maybe you didn't. But this idea that we have to look like the world, we have to smell like the world, we have to talk like the world, we have to be addicted like the world, it's of the world. Amen? And friends, we're supposed to call the world out of Babylon into God's church. But if I look just like the church and smell just like the church and act just like the church, what am I calling him into? Babylon life. Hello? But I go to church on the right day. So what? Your life speaks more volumes than the day you worship on. Come on, amen?
That's just too straight. I don't like how he preaches. All my toes are really bleeding right now.
Praise the Lord. Am I doing this to beat down the church? No, I'm sharing this with you to reform the church. Why? Because we're deformed. And the reformer wants to work reformation and revival in my heart to make me more like him and less like the world. But I have to not let this control me anymore. Sue Palmer, in her book Toxic Childhood, this book, when I was reading this, I was like, man, I wish I would have been even more vigilant. And I was already the vigilant. How is the modern world damaging? Yes, our children. And what can we do about it? You need to read it. We are seeing children's brains' development damaged because they don't engage in the activity they have engaged in for millennia. I'm not against technology and computers, but before they start social networking, they need to learn to make real relationships with people. In fact, I had a brother come up to me at lunch, and he said, we just saw a report, heard a report on NPR, where the police officers were not engaging properly, and they were not able to communicate well with the brand new generation. They had never had this problem before. And so they had to go to training to learn how to communicate and engage with these children that don't know how to engage now. Police officers need specialized training to just connect with the kids of today. Why? Because we're not giving it to them. We're letting technology babysit and parent our children. Shame on us. Scary. So it's not just internet time, but specifically social networking sites that are causing alarming concerns too. In an article from the UK site Daily Mail entitled "Social Websites Harm Children's Brain," chilling, and then here's the byline, chilling warning to parents from top neuroscientists. The writer states, such sites as Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, and Snapchat and others, are said to shorten attention spans, encourage instant gratification, and make young people more self-centered. And I contend, not just young people, but older people too. Why? If you have a brain, it's going to impact it the same. Continuing on. While these social networking sites are popular and extremely profitable, a growing number of psychologists and neuroscientists believe they may be doing more harm than good. Among them is Professor Susan Greenfield. The more I read about this and what this lady has discovered, I have a really high level of respect for Dr. Greenfield, one of Britain's most well-respected neuroscientists. She found some teens are now using up to, yes, this is true, 18 hours of technology per day. Listen to this. By the age of 1, 14% of children are spending at least 1 hour per day using mobile media. I'm sorry, what age? 14% of 1-year-olds are using an hour of tech a day. There's no chance for that brain to develop properly. Incredible. In her book, Mind Change, How Digital Technologies Are Leaving Their Mark on Our Brains, she cites about 250 peer-reviewed studies and papers on this subject. Her book has been described by several reviewers as the most extensively referenced book of its kind. A reporter commenting on her book said, her book makes disturbing reading for millions of those social lives depending on logging onto their favorite website or apps each day. Dr. Greenfield's research strikes a chord with parents and teachers who have a growing concern that many youngsters lack the ability to communicate or concentrate away from their screens. Now, Dr. Greenfield also stated, we know that small babies need constant reassurance that they exist. My fear is that these technologies are infantilizing the brain into a state of small children who are attracted by buzzing noises and bright lights, who have small attention span, and who live for the moment. So they're finding the tech is infantilizing the brain. That's what's going to happen eventually. She adds that computer games, fast-paced TV shows were also a factor. And an important point to remember, to make sure we're all clear on, reasonable, limited, governed, controlled use is not known to be problematic. This is where I think the balance is. Some people are going to want to go away and throw it away. And maybe you should take a fast from it. Maybe you should fast for 30, 60, 90 days from it and gain your brain back. Oh, that would be a terrible thing. Yeah, because you might wake up and go, whoa, where have I been for a while? How come I'm not getting any projects done around the home? How come I haven't gotten that PhD or that master's or that BA or learned to play the piano or learned to paint or got my yard work done or even helped my kids with their homework? Why haven't I done all this stuff? Yes, master. I will obey you, technology. Now, we do not know that just regular, controlled, limited access is a problem. Excessive access and excessive engagement is a problem. But it's very clear it is a problem, even small amounts, with very young children. Because this is where their brain is exploding with development. And we want the blueprint to be strong. So frankly, I'll be very clear. For children under 7, if you come and ask me, I would say it's no. Now it's up to you to decide. I can't parent your child for you. For me in my house, it was no. And guess what? My kids survived. My kids thrived. They got going on the trampoline. They built the forts. They made jumps for their bikes. They learned how to skateboard. They learned how to ski. They learned how to ride quads and dirt bikes. And yes, we invested in those things. Why? Because I could buy a trampoline for less than one phone. I didn't even have to finance it. I'm paying $35 a month so my kid's life can be destroyed. How convenient. Dr. Greenfield said, I've never suggested that reasonable use of the internet damages the adolescent brain. However, intense use of the internet and video games does indeed lead to changes in the physical brain comparable to drug abuse. Britain's leading neuroscientist saying it's like drug abuse. Commenting on her book, Mind Change, she says, the topics in the book span neuroscience, psychology, sociology, and many other disciplines. The goal was not to produce simplistic sound bites, but to encourage informed debate about how technology can and is changing our mind. And we'll be jumping into what's known as brain hacking next. And I went right into, what time are we doing the second meeting? 3:45, in 15 minutes. We'll have a 15-minute, I thought it was 3:30, so I was like, shoot. We'll take a 15-minute break. And if you have any questions brewing into your mind, think of them, write them down, because at the end of this meeting, we may have time to entertain a few questions. So we'll see you back here at 3:45. I don't think we're going to have any music. I think we're going to go right into the meeting, and we don't want to have to corral all the chickens running around. So come on back at 3:45. God bless you.